Hello, I'm Alan Turley and I chair this financial inclusion group in North Staffordshire, which is mainly Stoke-on-Trent and neighbouring Newcastle-under-Lyme in North Staffordshire in England. The group's a simple working partnership of organisations who each have lots of other things to do, but we come together to see if we can improve the help we give to people on money advice, debt advice, benefit claiming, and anything else that adds to their poverty and their vulnerability. What I'm hoping to do with this presentation is give you a bit of the context of the lives these people are living in an area like this. This is a poor area, it's not the poorest in England, but the complexities of what they face is worthy of note in terms of what and how you do develop and deliver your products and services in the future. The facts I have gathered, as you see there, mainly from ONS, and with some very good help from Steve Johnson, the City Council. Any mistakes are definitely mine, not his. So, start with the level of deprivation. This is the UK's way of measuring multiple deprivation. So you can see the years across the top, going from left to right, and down are the various elements of the indices of multiple deprivation. So overall, we were the 16th most deprived, one being the worst, most deprived, and we're now 14th. If you look back to the year 2000, actually, Stoke was the 34th worst deprived. So it's lost a very steady one place per year for 20 years, and there's no real sign that it's changing. But then if you look at the other elements, on income, actual cash coming in, we're only the 25th most deprived. It has dropped. The period it's dropped from 2017 to 19 is roughly accounted for by the period known as austerity. Government cuts to services, more unemployment in public sector, and freezes and caps on benefits is what accounts for that. Employment surprisingly has done well, as it has across the UK, but in the local area a lot of that is 0 hours contracts and very basic minimum wage levels. Health has continued to be a problem and has been for generations. Education is the biggest deficit. In some aspects, that education element includes early years, primary school, secondary school, and further adult education and skills. And it's the two school partitions that show the worst elements. Currently, about 40% of children leave primary school without being able to read, write and add up. The adult population in Stoke has an equivalent reading age to a 9-year-old adult in England. Please don't repeat that. The barriers aren't a problem. The barriers is about, can they access housing, can they access services, and actually we've always done pretty well at that. Crime is bad, but it's not the worst. Living environment is pretty good, lots of open countryside, but actually poor people and vulnerable people tend not to access it. What I would say about that overall is, I think if you look at different places in England, you could see that the weakness is elsewhere than education. It might be crime, it might be housing, it might be just income. And I think if you look at the weakest, that's the place you should start if you're trying to improve things, which we are. So let's look at personal finances. I've put a few things together here. Again, I've just shown the household income to make sure we know who we're talking about. So look at no current accounts. In England, 6.22% of the population have no current account. Here in this ward is 12.39. A ward is a small area of a city, and in this ward it's geographically based, 11,200 population. So of the adults there, twice the national average have no bank account. It's intriguing to know how they manage, and I think there are people who have basic bank accounts who, as soon as they get their benefits paid in, for example, they take the cash out the next day. I think they're worthy of some study, actually, as to how they cope with the world. Our over-indebtedness and the next 3 or 4 headings come from a report by the Money and Pension Service, was the Money Advisory Service, and it shows that our level of over-indebtedness is at least double the national average. Over-indebted in these terms means they're not regularly paying their priority bills. They're behind in the last 3 or 4 months on their priority bills, for which they're going to get in trouble one way or another, either court or eviction or any other thing you like to know, more debt probably. But then look at the next 4, or if you look at the next 2, comfortable and coping. This is how are they handling their finances, how do they feel about it. And they're soft measures, but if you add comfortable and coping together, 56% of the adult population are actually getting on with it and managing. And you must remember in all of these facts that there will be people who get through and who do the job and have always got through and done the job. They may have debts, but they'll pay them. And in all these vulnerabilities that we're going to come to next, and these issues here, you can't ever be sure that it's the same cohort on every one. The 44% in one place might be different to the 44% in another place. So just understand all that. If you look at the very difficult section further below, 17.5% of people in that ward are really, really struggling. If you take the 15,000 income, which includes their benefits, in a household which might be typically 2 adults and 2 children, I have tried to work out their monthly costs, and it doesn't add up. I don't know how they get through with that money. It's very difficult, even in what is a relatively poor area. Rent and house prices aren't very high, but even then it's a struggle even with your benefits. Independent insolvencies at one end of the debt scale are the worst in England and have been for a few years, and same with debt relief orders. So what that shows you in all of those things on this chart is there is a lot of struggling people who are trying to get through life. If you look at their other vulnerabilities, so here we've got the same layout, England, Stoke and the ward. You add some of these other aspects in and you realise what's going on a bit more. So in the ward, on no qualifications, 37.4% of adults haven't got an academic qualification. If they're lucky, they might have a driving licence, and that generally is one of the biggest skills they can get if they haven't got anything else. But those people are going to struggle to get work even pre-COVID. As there's more unemployment further up the income scales, people with better qualifications will be taking any job going, which will leave these people with a far longer wait to even get on an interview list. Miraculously, under degrees, 11% managed to get to universities, and you see proud pictures in people's front rooms of people in their cap and gown getting their degree. Proves what can be done, actually. If you look at health, I could have picked 5 or 6 issues here. They're all pretty similar. They show very poor health. Local senior people will probably tell you that that was to do with our industrial past, heavy industries. Well, it's not. If you look at child health and you look at the age of people at the age of about 30 who weren't born when the heavy industries disappeared, they're still ill. We are breeding ill people. Depression leading to mental health. We know the figures about mental health. Why would you not be depressed if this was the life you were facing? On the welfare side, I've picked out universal credit. It's the go-to thing for most people as soon as they hit trouble now. And you can see there how the numbers were. We were twice the national average in the ward, 14.5 against 7.4. And those figures are doubling already. So the lockdown here started mid-March, and by the end of June, those figures had doubled. They are big numbers already. And other benefits being claimed similarly. They're big numbers. We'll come back to that in a minute. Children living in poverty as measured after housing costs, that's AHC. Nearly 41.5% of children turning up for the first day at school are in poverty. I think the opportunity there is to make that the day you say to their parents at school gates, I think we could help you. And those other topics I've just mentioned below, we know they're prevalent, we know it comes with the territory, there are figures on them, but they don't always tie up to the area. Same with crime, the figures are reported by where the crime occurs, not where the perpetrator lives. So all of those things are in that mix for the majority of these people, but don't forget they're entitled to their dignity for all that, and there are lots of exceptions of people who manage it. They might be part of the answer. So as we get through COVID, hopefully get through COVID, you'd be a bit naive not to conclude that unemployment and claimant counts are going to double at least. There will be many more low-income households. Child poverty will go up. Mental health will go up. Figures, physical health will get worse. And God forbid, there'll be more alcohol and drugs consumed, and there'll be more depression. It's safer to assume that's going to happen and plan for it and hope you're wrong. We have learnt locally how to solve some of these things. You need to work across the agencies because these people have a real propensity for falling through the gaps between agency provision. As soon as you put it together, in my experience, you get probably a 10 to 15% uplift in figures as a change, an uplift as an addition. It looks like on education we're actually grasping the nettle and starting to have a good look at that for the first time in about 15 or 20 years. People are out of denial and saying, oh right, we need to look at it, let's do it. That should take 2 years if it's done properly, and it will take 10 years to play out, which is not a political time frame that suits anybody, but it's what has to happen. Physical and mental health, there are things we can do, and they've got to be treated. We've done a big plan for money management, we're looking for funding for that. So when you look at the numbers, the costs to the exchequer of what's going on in this area is enormous. So it just makes sense to try and get some money to put these things right and to start getting out of where we are. It is doable, but it's about people. I don't think it's about roads, I don't think it's about posh pavements or shopping centres or trains even. I think it's about changing people, giving them some skills to make better choices. So please, keep them in mind when you're developing your products and services. I think it will help you. Thank you very much.